Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Discovery Debrief, a podcast that dives headfirst into the proverbial deep end of our favorite spacefaring franchise on the road to Season 2 of its latest entry, Star Trek Discovery. I'm co-host Chris Clow, and I'm joined by two additional members of our bold panel of Star Trek franchise explorers, including Rachael Clow.
Hi.
Hi. And Cicero Holmes.
I want to dance with somebody.
The topic of the day. Yeah, we were talking about funny face as we were getting ready to do this. Yeah. Well, today we're going to keep things on the shorter side once again, since we'll be discussing the recently released second episode of the Short Trek series. But before we get into that, what we typically do, and since it's been a little bit since we last recorded, just because the scheduling has been on a little bit of a hiccup, I am transitioning into a new job, so that has, thank you very much, but it's kind of made my editing duties a little, I've lightened the load a little bit too much, so I need to get back into the groove of things, so I'm glad to be recording with you fine
You've
folks.
been hanging out in 1899.
That's true. That, oh man, that is so... Oh, it's been pretty fantastic. I'm not going to lie. Playing Red Dead Redemption 2. I didn't think that I could get hooked the same way that the first game hooked me, but it's doing the job. Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But what have you guys been up to since the last time we recorded, particularly if it's come down to Star Trek engagement, other than what we're about to talk about? Cicero, why don't you kick us off?
So the life in Trek has been a little hit and miss. One of the things that I've done to re-engage with the Trek franchise has been to listen to some of our past episodes, more specifically, the last two episodes that we've released. They were great, actually, getting to take a listen to us talk about not regeneration, but the Visitor. And also to talk about the initial entry into these short treks. So that was a fun listen. Additionally, every now and then I happen to, on Sunday nights on twitch.tv/Roll20 app, happen to be playing as an Andorian on a Star Trek tabletop RPG.
That's right. Yeah. So, how's that been going?
Yeah, it's so I pinch hit this past Sunday. They beamed me in for an away mission, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, if you guys are into tabletop RPGs and want to check something out, make sure you do check it out. It is at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, on twitch.tv every Sunday at twitch.tv/Roll20 app.
And I'm sure that you can find the direct link at Stubby Stan on Twitter.
Yeah, sure. You can find links there. The other thing that I've been engaging with it's not really a happy topic. It's a celebratory one, but not really a happy one, and is tangentially tied into Star Trek, is mourning the loss of the one and only Stanley Lieber, also known as Stan Lee. It is funny, what, like, people are listening and saying, some people maybe, Cicero, why the hell are you talking about Stan Lee on a Star Trek podcast? I think Stan Lee, his imprint and the mark that he left on not only pop culture but culture in general ties directly into Star Trek, I believe, because he was part of that vanguard that allowed us to dream and create the modern myths of of the 20th and the 21st century. I think these are going to be, if humanity is fortunate to live for another 200 or 300 years on this planet, these will be the stories that are talked about in the same way that we talk about Greek mythology and all of those other things, going forward. And I think that Stan Lee, along with Gene Roddenberry and Steve Ditko and all the greats, really allowed us to imagine and believe and to hope. So I've been spending some time kind of in between tears, celebrating the life of Stan Lee and the impact that it's made on my life.
Beautifully said. Yeah, that's obviously a loss that uh, every member of the, if you want to say the geek community. I mean, it certainly extends far beyond that, though. I mean,
Right.
Stan Lee grew up reading Shakespeare, and you can absolutely tell the kinds of stories that he was into because it is very much reflected in his earliest comic book work.
Right.
He started at Timely Comics, what became Marvel, at the
Right.
age of 17
Yeah.
in 1939.
It's crazy.
And who knew that 17-year-old kid would go on to help create some of the most enduring icons in popular culture?
Right.
I've been having a lot of difficulty wrapping my head around the loss of Stan Lee. When I worked at another website that I had to be a senior editor for, the thing that I always hated the most about that job was pre-packaging obituaries.
Mm.
But as many of those as I had to write, I was never assigned one for Stan Lee because losing him almost seemed kind of incomprehensible.
Right.
But we also lost Steve Ditko, co-creator
Right.
of Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and a number of other characters. And we lost Jack Kirby just
Right.
about 20 years ago in the late 1990s. And really, between those three, all of the iconic primary architects of the Marvel Comics universe are gone now.
And
but
DC Comics universe, really.
yeah, really. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, of
Right.
course. But
Right.
but it's definitely a loss that is it's kind of hard to put into words just because of how influential all of that work has been. But what a legacy to leave behind, and I think that's probably the best thing that we can take away from it.
Right.
But yeah, very well said, Cicero.
Thank you.
Rachel, what have you been up to since the last time we recorded, particularly when it comes to Trek?
I feel awkward talking about Trek now because you guys were all nice talking about Stan Lee.
If you have feelings about Stan Lee, please.
I have an embarrassing dearth of feelings towards Stan Lee.
Okay.
So I will not
That's
mention
okay.
it. I watched The Best of Both Worlds, parts 1 and 2.
Yes,
Nice.
And wow, that really holds up.
Mm-hmm.
For being as old as it is. Just totally, it's like it was made yesterday.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I also watched Home or Family or whatever the one after.
Yeah, right afterwards.
Yeah, that was also a great episode. So, and then I also watched the episode with Dr. Sung calling Data home, which is not one of my favorite episodes, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one's not the most memorable.
AKA Brent Spiner is every single character.
Yeah, very true. Well, as far as kind of what I've been up to when it comes to Trek, not too much, unfortunately, just because, like I said before, my headspace has been in some other places between job and between running around the Wild West. But I did notice, and Cicero, this is something that you and I are going to have to connect with one of these days. The Age of Discovery expansion on Star Trek Online dropped yesterday for consoles.
Yes, it did.
And so we might have to dive into that together, and maybe we can talk about it on this show. But Tilly is a featured character in the campaign, and I know that Mary Wiseman did voice work, and it also sounds like Jeffrey Combs did voice work in it too, as a descendant of Shran from Enterprise. So that's pretty cool. But other than that, I think we are now ready to jump into the discussion surrounding Short Trek's Episode 2, Calypso. So we got a second look at what these shorts have on offer, and it seems like this second episode was quite a departure from the first one. We all have some differing opinions about how well the first one landed, so what did you guys make of this one generally before we dive into its specifics? Rachel.
I really liked it.
Uh-huh.
Much better than the first one.
Much better.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was engaged throughout the whole thing. I was not confused.
Very good.
And I felt satisfied when it was done.
Okay. All right. Well, very positive. That's good. Cicero, you alluded off mic to some different feelings. Well, why don't you share those general ones with us, and then we'll get into specifics.
So the general feeling is this. It was shot beautifully. The performances were incredible. And as a story, it was a satisfying one, but I was left underwhelmed. In fact, my name as what we use is peek behind the curtains. We use Zencaster every week. I try to come up with a nice nickname for myself, and my nickname for myself this week is Underwhelmero. So yes, I was underwhelmed.
All right, well, fair enough. I think I kind of fall in between you guys. The only reason why I am kind of on Cicero's side is that its connection to the canon seems tenuous. But then again, I'm on Rachel's side because we've watched it twice now. And even though there's a couple of points in the middle of it when I'm watching it where I kind of go, oh, okay, by the end of it, I'm always like welling up a little bit. Like, I don't know what it is, but it had, maybe it's the swelling music at the end of it. Sure. And the allusion to the movie title on the shuttlecraft, but whatever it is, I mean, it left an emotional impression on me that I can't really ignore. But before we jump in, here's a little short synopsis for this episode. So, the USS Discovery, after drifting in space for 1,000 years, has evolved to the point that its computer system has become sentient and named itself Zora. She retrieves a passing escape pod carrying a man who doesn't wish to reveal his name to her, but he says that she can call him Kraft. Zora reveals that she's been ordered to hold her current position for the past millennium by the unnamed captain of Discovery, though she doesn't offer any additional details about who exactly made up the ship's crew at the time that everybody left. Zora initially keeps Kraft aboard the ship. She wants company and is beginning to fall in love with him, but eventually lets him take Discovery's last remaining shuttle to return to his home on a planet called Alcor 4, which apparently has some sort of human colonization presence. Now it does. Right, yeah. At some point 1,000 years after the 23rd century. But that's kind of a sterile description because I think we're going to have a lot to talk about when we talk, particularly when Rachel is going to walk us through the sort of mythological connections and just the emotional beats, whether they landed with us or not. So, Rachel, before we dive into our next point, can you give us a little bit of an overview about its mythological connection?
Well, Kraft is Odysseus.
Yeah.
So, you may recall that there's a poem called Homer's Odyssey, and it is about a dude named Odysseus who goes to fight a war and then has to go back from the war to his wife, and it takes him 10 years. And he has all sorts of crazy adventures along the way. And so Odysseus is known by an epithet. So Homer used a lot of what are called Homeric epithets. So they're like combinations of words that fit the meter of the poem that he was telling. And so the adjective that's attached to Odysseus is a Greek word that is sometimes translated into English as crafty. So that's probably where that came from. And so the title Calypso refers to an episode in the Odyssey where Odysseus is sort of held captive by this water nymph who is in love with him, and she tricks him a bunch to get him to not leave, and eventually he is able to leave.
Okay.
So the craft is crafty. We never knew his real name. He's been out there 10 years. He's trying to get back to his wife. He is waylaid by a alluring lady of the ocean or the ocean of stars, if you will, and eventually escapes her clutches.
So would you be comfortable then calling this an adaptation of that story?
Sure.
Yeah. Does that seem like it applies?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, because when you look at the details of it, it seems to line up pretty closely with the original mythological story. So that part of it definitely elevates it. But something that I find just generally amazing about this one is the setting, because it takes place 1,000 years in the future, which I believe technically makes it the furthest point in the canon of the entire franchise. So with the aim of this episode, and it's very separate standing from the rest of Star Trek history, but also with that mythological connection, what did you guys make of this one overall? Now, Cicero, I know that might be, I'm not sure if you were aware of that connection or not. I found out about it after the fact. Rachel had to tell me.
Yeah, I was not at all.
Does that affect your perception of it at all?
It definitely it makes more sense now. It definitely makes the story more poignant. But it doesn't affect my overall feeling about being underwhelmed.
Okay.
Yeah. And we can, we'll dive into that and why that is.
Sure. Okay. Rachel, what do you think about how it stands sort of in the Trek mythology? Or does that matter?
I didn't really think of it as particularly connected to the Trek mythology. I sort of assume 1,000 years is so far in the future from the setting of Star Trek that what happens in it has really no bearing on the present day of Trek as it is. I mean, the Federation may well still be out there. They just forgot about Discovery, right? You can think whatever you want. So I don't think I just didn't connect the two in my mind and kind of looked at this as a standalone story that's sort of a retelling of a much older story.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think I'm inclined to agree with you. I mean, you know how I get, though. I get so bogged down in the canonicity of things that, I look at this and I wonder, well, so does this mean that Discovery is going to be safe for as long as we see it? It looks pretty good.
That's true.
I mean, it's
not going to get blown up like every other Star Trek ship.
It's not in pieces. It's well maintained, even if it might be a little dusty on the inside. The food is preserved.
The systems are still working.
Yeah. The computer systems are obviously still working and even advancing unto themselves. But, that it seems like kind of gets in the way of what this story was trying to do, just by kind of serving as a futuristic take on a classically mythological story. Is this the right venue for that? That's another question.
Right.
I found it enjoyable. I guess I kind of question the purpose of it, only because I think the big question that arises out of this is whether or not there's going to be some kind of connection between Craft and season 2. Do you guys have any thoughts about that? Was this a wholly isolated spin-off, or could we be seeing the implications of this expand into the actual second season of Discovery? Cicero, what do you think?
Yeah, so like I said, when we were talking about what I've been doing, when I listened back to us talk about the Tilly short, I think
Yeah.
one of the and rightfully so, one of the arguments that was made by both Rachel and by Zachy was the fact that it just kind of didn't matter. Like this story didn't matter. That it was kind of confusing. As Rachel called it, all the jibber jabber. That was that kind of pushed the story along. And the thing that was redeeming for me was the fact that it stood alone, it stood by itself, all alone in the canon, but it helped to color some of the black and white spaces of the Tilly character.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get any of that in this story, because even the one character that could potentially be illuminated by this is Zora the computer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless at some point during the course of this season, we wind up seeing that the computer starts to gain a level of sentience and becomes somewhat of a character in its own right, then like none of this matters. It was a great story. It was beautiful. It is something that if someone wanted to see what Star Trek Discovery was all about in terms of like, oh, is it cheesy TV, what have you, this is something in 15 minutes that I could show them and see and say, look at those sets, they're beautiful. Look at the shots that they take, they're beautiful. Look at the effects, they're
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, they're top notch. Now watch this, now watch the show.
Right.
And from that aspect, and it doesn't ruin any of the show for them because none of the characters are in it,
Mm-hmm.
except for the ship. So I think from that perspective, it does a job, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't help me to feel like I've got something extra to go into season 2 with. And that's kind of what I was hoping to get out of these shorts. But
Sure.
I'm not, and because I didn't, or because at least today, 6-8 weeks before the premiere of season 2, it appears to be that way, then that leaves me underwhelmed.
Okay. I think that's understandable. Rachel, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that this could potentially add anything as we go into season 2, or are you okay with these potentially just being isolated and separate that don't really have any bearing on what we're about to see?
I'm fine with this one being totally separate.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently I was not fine with the last one being totally separate, but like, I don't know. I could change my mind if I want.
Yes, you can.
So I would be fine with it. I would also be kind of excited if there was some sort of small reference made to it in the main season.
Mm-hmm.
I like sort of insider Easter egg things like that.
Yeah.
But I think that the writers are just sort of playing around with different sort of story structures, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm okay with it just, being by itself.
Yeah. And, as separate as this one is, I don't think you could say that any of the other ones are going to be nearly this sort of, I guess, experimental, just by virtue of who we're going to see in them.
Right.
We saw Tilly in the first one. Obviously, she was a pivotal character in the first season and will be in the second season. Then we have this one, but then next time when the next short trek drops on December the 6th, It's we're going to see Saru and we're going to see other Kelpians, and obviously that's pretty embedded in the additions to the mythology that Discovery is making. And then the final one, right before season 2 actually drops, is going to be about Harry Mudd.
Right.
And you can't really do a story in a Star Trek show that isn't connected to what we've seen before if you include a character like Harry Mudd.
Right.
He's arguably the most inside baseball, so to speak. And so when it comes to this one, I guess my general perspective is that one sort of short one-off is permissible out of the 4. It keeps the formula, I guess, a little bit fresh, but also might give you some new perspective on some aspects of the of the world of the show that we had never seen before. And this character, even though he's based on one of mythology's most classic heroes, I found the performance to be solid.
Yeah.
And I found the character to be interesting, which kind of makes me sad that maybe we won't be seeing him again, at least not in any predictable sense.
Cast him as someone else.
Yeah, I mean, they hey, Star Trek has done it before.
Sure.
I mean, they could absolutely do that. But Cicero, tell me what you think about Kraft, just as a character that we followed. I mean, is he at the center of where your issues might lie with this one, or did you like him in spite of how the rest of it?
Oh no, I thought the performances were phenomenal. I thought they were really good. Aldous Hodge, he was in Hidden Figures.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, he's a really great actor, and if this was your first time really kind of seeing him with a capital S, I think that he did himself justice. And the fact that really we got there were 4 actors in this entire episode, between himself and the 2 holograms dancing in the movie. I guess one looked like Fred Astaire.
Yeah, and then the other one was Katharine Hepburn, I think.
Audrey
Hepburn. Yeah. And then Zora as the kind of like the the disembodied voice of the computer, but their interaction was fantastic. I really felt like I felt immediately felt who this character was as Kraft, and the fact that he was at least initially distrustful of where he was, his surroundings, and who this person was that was talking to him, and then trying to figure out. It was very I felt like at the beginning, the conversation, the monologue, or it wasn't a monologue, the dialogue that he was having with Zora once he woke up was very at least initially I thought it was Shakespearean, but yeah, it was Homeran, or Homer-like. Like there was it's a very deliberate way of speaking that kind of didn't feel natural, but it worked. And then as we went through the story, I got it, and it worked for me. So yeah, nothing about my main issue with this has nothing to do with what we watched, but where it sits and why we watched it.
Sure.
And I think it leads to, and I don't want to derail things, but I think it leads to the question about what are these shorts and what are they for? And I think we posited that question after the first one, and we really didn't have an answer. And I think after the second one, I'm even less sure of what they're for.
That makes sense. I mean, yeah, because that was a pretty big portion of our discussion the last time. And maybe they're just for showcasing their technical ability. I mean, but also too, we still have 2 left. They could potentially choose to tie them all together in some form or fashion. I'm not really counting on that. But Rachel, what do you think they're for?
I think they're for keeping you subscribed to CBS All Access.
Well,
good job.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
but is that all you're getting out of them? Because this one,
you suggested that we cancel our CBS All Access until January, and then I was like, "What about the shorts?" And you're like, "Oh yeah,
that's true." Well, yeah, no, I understand that, but would you? But this one, I think you would agree, it seemed far more artistically oriented than the first one.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked this one, but I don't have much of an answer of what they're for. And I think that probably the differing style of this one from the other one does not help us answer that question or formulate an answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, in conclusion, I do not know. Perhaps it will become clear. But I think probably the main impetus for the money being thrown at them is to keep people subscribed to CBS All Access, because it doesn't really have a whole lot of value.
Well, so then if that's the point, I think that is definitely a salient one. The question is to both of you, was this episode and the one that preceded it worth $7 or $10, depending on which subscription package you have? Was it worth $7 to you? Was it worth $10 to you?
No.
I mean, I don't think I can really say yes to a question like that.
I mean, but that's the equation, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
no, it is.
Because you're not watching anything else on these services. Yeah. And the only reason that you have these services right now, today, is so that you could have watched 30 minutes of Star Trek.
Yeah. Yes.
And sort of inertia.
Right. Exactly. Apathy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that always plays into it in some way. But, I guess I kind of look at this as I'm surprised that CBS is still maintaining access to the Star Trek series on Netflix, at least in the United States, because it seems like CBS, at least just with the news that we've been observing now over the past several months, with them kicking up the Picard show and with the potential animated show in the works, and rumblings about whether or not they want to create even more live action Star Trek shows, so that there's always Trek something on the service. We're obviously not to that point yet, presuming we ever will be. I have an extraordinary lack of faith in CBS to give me Star Trek when I want Star Trek.
Right.
But, in the here and now, I can't say that this episode on its own was worth the monthly subscription fee. But at the same time, too, I also am enough of a fan that I want to contribute more to the health of the franchise, which I know sounds really dumb probably to a lot of people.
No, it doesn't, because, if we weren't around, this wouldn't be around.
That's true.
Yeah. And if there weren't enough of us that kept the service, I have found other reasons to justify having the monthly subscription service, and have been using it to watch other CBS programming. So it has been, it definitely has been worthwhile to me, but had it not been for Discovery, I would not have had this service. And had there not been other things that I was interested in on CBS, then I may have canceled the service. And while that may not have stopped them from having a second season, it may have stopped them from having a third. Because, if that money continually wasn't coming in, then it'd be hard for them to justify, or even, scrounge up the money, because the budgets are I'm sure impressive for a show that looks this good.
Well, and I mean, if we're just talking about the wider service for the moment, I have to believe, and Rachel, I'm sure you would agree with this too, that Discovery's apparent success, because CBS is only saying good things about it and what it has done for them and for defining the service pretty much. Without Discovery, we may not have a new Twilight Zone to look forward to.
That is correct.
And we certainly wouldn't have the Picard show to look forward to.
That is correct.
And with all of these people, and we've talked to some of them, with these sort of dyed-in-the-wool Trek fans, which, I count myself a dyed-in-the-wool Trek fan. I guess I'm just a little bit more open-minded than some of these people. But those people are also probably going to be brought into the fold because we're all getting one of our major heroes in the franchise back.
Right.
And I can't imagine these people remaining holdouts and staying belligerent or maintaining a belligerent attitude towards the newest exploitations in the franchise if it means that we get a Jean-Luc Picard resurgent out of the deal.
Right.
So, these people who are talking about the Discovery having violated the sanctity of Star Trek, first of all, is total crap.
Yeah, well.
But also, it wrote the check to Patrick Stewart to come back.
Yes.
So how can you really dispute that?
Yes.
So, I don't know. Rach, what do you think just about the viability of CBS All Access in the current moment? Because we know what's coming. But is this sort of drip that we have in between seasons, as a Star Trek fan, is that enough of a justification for you to keep it?
Not really, but...
You're here now.
But it's happening.
Yeah.
Probably if we didn't have this podcast, I would say just wait and we'll watch them all in January, right?
Yeah.
But I think the subscription business model works because people are inherently lazy, and we will just let that $10 come out every month because it doesn't really make a difference in our bottom line by itself, and it's easier than taking the time to cancel and then sign up and cancel and that stuff. So, and CBS has to, they have to develop a streaming service. Network TV is dying.
Yeah.
And the people who are watching it are going to be dying. Well, I mean, Zachy has said his kids don't have a
concept of a show on
of
at
something
a time.
being on at a time.
Right.
And we don't have cable, and not very many people I know have it.
Right.
And the people I do know who have it aren't really watching prime time stuff. They have it for, because it came with their internet, and they like to watch Good Morning America.
Yeah.
So, it's
I really take exception to that stereotype. But as someone who still has cable, but that's okay.
Present company accepted.
Right.
You're a bit younger than I think the typical CBS viewer is.
Yes.
I think CBS in particular has an older audience.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, does it? See, I don't even know this much.
Historically, CBS is they're the channel of Murder, She Wrote and Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, and
CIS.
CIS, right.
Okay, all right. That you don't
your
need
parents'
to say
favorite show,
Yeah.
NCIS.
You don't need to say. Well, Rachel, you love Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
I stopped watching it because it was not made for binging, because the townsfolk always are doing something bad every episode.
They never learn anything.
And you start to be like, these are not good people. They just tried to lynch the black guy in town, and now we're just supposed to be okay with everything. And I'm like, I'm not okay with them. They burned books.
Yeah. Every week is a reset. Every week is a reset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like killing
Anyway,
Kenny.
yeah, exactly.
You bastards.
They become unsympathetic when watched as all together. In any case, so they have to make this shift to streaming. They have to at least try, and I think that the method in which they have chosen to do it by putting Star Trek on there is extremely smart, because it really gives you a chance to, or a lure. And I think that the lure is the most important thing, because once you net enough people in your talons,
Well, and
enough of them will just be too lazy to cancel that you'll make money.
And there's no indication that we're going to be getting a new series that stars Patrick Stewart.
Right.
That is not going to be on the primary network, which is insane to me.
Yeah.
But Cicero, you were going to say something.
Oh no, yeah. So what I was going to say was two things. First is the director for this episode. Again, like, I've got nothing but great things to say about the episode as a piece of work. The director was Olatunde Osunsanmi. Yeah, say that 3 times fast. And I think it's important to call that out, and to call out Alex Kurtzman and the whole crew over there at Star Trek, because they are definitely going out of their way to find new and fresh faces, both in front and behind the camera, and in addition to that, finding people of color,
Yes.
both, again, but in front of and behind the camera, to give them opportunities on a major stage. Even if it is a short, it is a Star Trek short. And giving them the chance to showcase their talents, for people that have never seen them before. So I wanted to definitely shout that out. Additionally, I was able to find a short paragraph, a synopsis of all 4 of the teaser episodes, or all 4 of the shorts.
Okay.
The next short with Saru is called The Brightest Star.
Yes.
And like you said, it's about other Kelpians. So the description is: before he was the first Kelpian to join Starfleet, Saru Doug Jones lived a simple life on his home planet of Kaminar with his father and sister. Young Saru, full of ingenuity and a level of curiosity uncommon among his people, yearns to find out what lies beyond his village, leading him on an unexpected path. Now, that sounds intriguing to me. These are the types of stories that, again, like the first one, Runaway, with Tilly. These are the types of stories that I wanted to see in these shorts, where we get a little bit of depth to these characters that we learned, that we met in the first season, but only in somewhat really, and basically for both of those characters, I think we only were able to view them through the eyes of primarily Michael Burnham. And so having them star in these shorts and giving us some insight into those characters is a great opportunity for us to see what those characters are like. The fourth one airing on January 3rd, just 2 weeks before the premiere, starring Harry Mudd, of course, played by Rainn Wilson, brilliantly, I might add. Harry Mudd, back to his old tricks, is called the escape artist. Back to his old tricks of stealing and double dealing, finds himself in a precarious position aboard a hostile ship, just in time to try out his latest con.
Oh boy!
Directed by Rainn Wilson, also.
Interesting.
So that'll be fun to watch. It's so, like, those are cool. It really comes back to, while I thought Calypso was a brilliant piece of television, what I wanted to see from these shorts was more character building of the people that didn't have a chance to be built during the course of the first season, because it was such, it was at such a breakneck pace even when it was slow, so that when we started season 2, I felt like, as Rachel kind of alluded to, I felt I had that little Easter eggy moment where I knew a little bit more about these characters when I saw them on screen the first time, or the first few times, so I could say, oh man, yeah, I like this person, or I like this aspect of them, or I want to learn more about this thing,
Yeah,
and bring that into the show with me.
very well said. Rachel, you wanted to...
Oh, I think that you raise an interesting point, that maybe the purpose of, or one of the purposes of these shorts might be to do some sort of talent development, or let people direct a short episode to see if maybe they could direct a longer one. Just a thought.
Yeah, a place to try it out. I mean, the point is well taken. I think that Discovery in general has a slick aesthetic to it.
Yes.
It's a pretty show.
Yes.
But Calypso was particularly gorgeous,
Yes.
I thought, just in its composition and, of course, in its visual effects. And even, with kind of an understated approach compared to what we saw in the series proper. I mean, the visuals granted by the mycelial network in season 1, and Ripper, and trade, moving between universes, and everything from the transporter effects to the phasers to looking at the planets to the descent of the sort of lens flare philosophy of the Kelvin movies into Discovery. I mean, Discovery is a beautiful show, but Calypso it took just enough from what we had seen before and what was familiar, and it definitely made the most of what we saw. So there was definitely talent all around, in front of and behind the camera,
Right.
for it, and that gives it value too. That definitely can't be sold short. All right, guys. Well, do you have any final thoughts on Calypso before we close it out for this week, Rachel?
No, I said everything.
You said everything.
I liked it.
All right.
I liked it.
Thumbs up from Rachel.
All right.
Cicero?
I liked the episode. I didn't like where it left us with respect to the main series, because it didn't feel like it connected. Also, the director of this episode, Alatunde Sanmi, also directed 2 episodes of the show proper last season. The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, great episode. Yes. And What's Past is Prologue, another great episode.
Also a very good one. Yeah.
So,
definitely.
So I really, again, I respect, if for no other reason, to love the show from a very selfish perspective. For me, I love the opportunities that they are giving, and the voices and the agency that they're giving to people of color, both in front of and behind the camera.
Most definitely. Yeah. I absolutely share your sentiments, and it'll be really interesting to see how things line up for the next one, especially since it's going to be focusing on a character that we all know so well.
Yes.
So, I know I said this before, but we had a bit of a schedule change, as I alluded to before. So next time on Debrief, we plan on bringing you the discussion surrounding Cicero's favorite Star Trek episode in our ongoing Debrief's favorite series, which is, Cicero?
Regeneration from Star Trek Enterprise Season 2. I think episode 22 or 23.
I think it's up there. Yeah, it's definitely near the end of season 2.
Yes.
It's a polarizing topic, but
Yes.
an interesting one nonetheless,
Yes.
particularly if you like diving into the weeds of the canon. And one of the things that I don't want to mention it too much, but it might actually resolve a canon issue weirdly enough. So we'll have to talk about that when we actually dive into it.
All right.
But we also plan after that to bring you a host of reviews. So obviously the next Short Treks episode, a couple of other debriefs favorites from some new and returning friends of the show. Sorry about our scheduling problem, Sharif and my buddy Mr. JB. And of the latest Discovery tie-in novel, Fear Itself, written by author James Swallow. And all of this is going to lead back to Season 2 of Discovery, which is just over 2 months away. Not that far. It's going to be here before we know it, and I'm pretty excited for it to come back. But as for right now, that's going to do it for episode 29 of Discovery Debrief. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please like and follow us on our social media channels. And if you'd be so kind, we'd also appreciate it if you wrote a review for the show on iTunes or Facebook. It only takes a minute, and we'll be happy to read your review on the air when it's posted. If you have any questions, you can follow the show on Twitter at DSC Debrief, where you can also find all of our individual Twitter handles. And feel free to send us questions through Twitter, our Facebook like page, or by emailing us at hailingfrequencies@discoverydebrief.com. Please be sure to set your courses for this feed for future episodes, and be sure to join us as we convene next time to discuss more favorites, more short treks, all as we barrel forward towards Season 2 of Discovery on January 17th. As always, though, until we meet again, please go boldly, my friends.